Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FCN right here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here, hanging out with you. Happy Wednesday, as we do every Wednesday on this show. Producer Tino will drop by, and we will talk about the most added and drop players in fantasy football as waivers have run in most leagues. I know high-stakes leagues, some of my other leagues happening this evening. I always talk about how it's the best when it happens, Thursday at 2 in the morning. Get that extra day of practice reports. We have some things filtering through here today. It is indeed Odell Beckham Jr. Day. I think, at least, it is Odell Beckham Jr. Day. There's lots of multiple reports. He cleared waivers yesterday. I just saw something from somebody out in New England here this morning that said that they are indeed in play, but Adam Schefter retweeted just about roughly an hour ago from Dana Rossini, and she was saying that Odell Beckham Jr. is honing in on New Orleans, Green Bay, and Kansas City. I think, 2 of the 3 would be pretty ideal. If Odell wants to be the guy, he probably chooses New Orleans, LSU. He's from Louisiana. Some of it kind of makes sense, but does he really want to play with Trevor Siemian or Taysom Hill? I don't know. I don't think. If he went to Green Bay, he'd have a legitimate shot. I mean, Green Bay or KC has a legitimate shot to win a Super Bowl, play some playoff games. In Green Bay, I think the offense would be absolutely lethal. You got Devonta Adams there. You have a safety over the top. It leaves some one-on-one coverage for OBJ. He may not be the guy there inside that offense, but it's a solid three-headed monster when you include Aaron Jones and then Aaron Rodgers, who says there's a small possibility he won't play this week against the Seahawks. And then if he went to Kansas City, of course, they've been looking for another piece inside that offense. Josh Gordon didn't really work out for them. I don't know. How many targets is he going to get? Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are there. Clearly, KC doesn't want to run the football, even though they are basically getting 5 yards per carry. Teams are daring KC to run the football, but they don't want to do that. And maybe they're going to have to do that because it seems like teams have really figured them out on offense. So we'll keep an eye on that throughout. If you're watching live here, on Game Plus, we may not get the news, but, you could always reach out at Chris Meaney if you have any questions about Odell Beckham Jr. I wrote in the article on Monday over at FTNFantasy.com in the buy low, sell high, and trade targets that I would look to flip him. Honestly, if he went to Green Bay, I'd probably hold. If he went to KC, I'd flip him, right? You got the stock will be high. People will get all excited about the Chiefs, but there's just too much going on there inside that offense. I just don't feel like he would be all that productive. I think he'd be, some highs and some lows. And if you went to New Orleans, I guess the targets and the volume would be there. But again, it's not an offense that I'm really digging right now. So we'll keep an eye on things. We'll follow throughout the show. If you're hanging out with us live here, YouTube, wherever it is that you're watching, any questions, you can always hit us up. You're watching the replay on our YouTube channel. Leave a question there in the section, and I will always circle back and get to it before, obviously there's no games here tonight in the NFL, but, before maybe waivers run here this evening for you, or if you just have any questions, I'll always get to them. There's a couple news items here. There's only a handful of games in the NHL, but we will have some shot props for you as well as some picks. As I mentioned, Tino's going to drop by. We'll talk most added, most dropped, and take a look at the most traded players in fantasy football as well. Try to get you set up for Week 10 already. The halfway point is done, and we are now turning the page into really the stretch run of fantasy football playoff time. But, if you're out of your season-long leagues, we still have a lot of fun on this show. And also, I'll just point to ftndaily.com. Maybe you want to dive into a little bit of DFS as well. Maybe if your season-long leagues are dead, and hopefully they're not. But some news items here before we break. I mentioned Rodgers. I'm really starting to get sick of Aaron Rodgers, but we got to bring him up. Small possibility he won't play this week. He needs a negative test by Saturday, I believe. So that's just a day before he plays the Seahawks. So we'll keep an eye on that situation throughout the week. But we won't have any news really until Saturday, most likely. And then Mike White is going to play here for the Jets. He's going to make his return, and they are heavy underdogs again against the Bills. Man, the Bills, I still can't get over that loss against the Jags. Sam Darnold fractured scapula. He is out several weeks, so it's PJ Walker Walker time. We've been talking about this on this show that it could be PJ Walker time sooner rather than later. Unfortunately for Sam Darnold, he's going to be out for a few weeks. But you know what? I don't know if this is a significant downgrade. Like, Sam Darnold hadn't been playing good football. I still view DJ Moore as a pretty good buy low candidate. I believe in the talent. I think PJ Walker, we've seen a small sample size of him over the past couple years, be okay. He can move the ball with his legs a little bit. And, like I said, Sam Darnold's just not been playing good football. So if you're a DJ Moore owner, don't panic. I don't think you should panic with this move. And maybe this is life for Robbie Anderson. If he's hanging around your waiver wire, maybe you can pick him up. He's probably free, right? You don't have to spend any fab on this guy. He's been dropped. We've been talking about him as a drop, as a lot of concerns when it comes to Robbie Anderson. I mean, he's had a lot of drops himself, but a free ad, a free pickup, you never know what could happen. A quarterback change, maybe he hones in on Robbie Anderson. Maybe Robbie Anderson is his guy. We'll see what happens there moving forward. Gronk didn't practice today. Back spasms, no practice for Jarvis Landry. Sammy Watkins returned to practice. I don't think that's a huge deal. I do believe Rashad Bateman is the guy to pick up in Baltimore. Speaking of the Ravens, no Latavius Murray. He didn't practice. That's not a great sign. He didn't practice all week. He missed last week. They had a bye, so he hasn't really practiced now in about 2.5 weeks. Devonta Freeman, as we get to the most added players, he is atop of the board, and I think he's a decent pickup. I absolutely do think he's a decent pickup. He had, I think, 70 yards on the ground, and he found the end zone, a receiving touchdown. And then Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a game-time decision. Nick Chubb, in case you missed yesterday, he tested positive for COVID. So he needs back-to-back negative tests before he can get back on the field. Doesn't look good for his status this weekend. So Dearness Johnson, season yet again. And then James Robinson does look like he is expected to return. All right, so if you're hanging out, we got a few shot props and NHL picks later on, but Tino's hanging by. He's going to bring the beers. It's Labatt Blue season here. If you missed yesterday's show, you have no idea why I even brought that up. But we'll have some fun with Tino. We'll talk about the most added and drop players in fantasy football. Also, the most traded players and some big names on there. Some players that I would not flip and some players I'm definitely into trading away from my roster. So Mean Streets continues here on Game Plus Network. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus a Network. Chris Meaney and producer Tino Rodriguez here with us. We are going to talk about the most added and drop players as well as the most traded players in fantasy football as we do every single Wednesday. So, Tino, before we get into that, I wanted to get your thoughts on Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, you're very familiar with what OBJ has to offer. This is, as I said off the top of the show, the teams that are rumored to be in on him. New England, one of those teams, but it does seem like he's making his choice between the Kansas City Chiefs, the New Orleans Saints, and the Green Bay Packers. We can talk from a real-life standpoint where you think the best opportunity for him to win a championship would be, but from a fantasy football standpoint, who do you think is the best team that he could choose?
Well, I think the most attractive one, you look at the Green Bay Packers, obviously, right? You get the best quarterback, the best situation, a playoff team, top of the division. And it really depends what OBJ is trying to look to gain here. Is he trying to chase a championship or is he looking for some stability in his career? I think if he wanted to do that, the New England Patriots make the most sense if he wanted to look long-term after this year. If not, we're doing this whole thing, the whole song and dance over again, with him being a free agent next year because he'll probably only sign for the veteran minimum, maybe a little bit more. But I also think that'll just make the waters even murkier because Rodgers is going to try to leave at the end of this year. Devontae Adams still doesn't have an extension. So you bring in OBJ. I mean, it makes sense from that perspective, but I just think that turns into a big headache I think in terms of fantasy, though, he kind of could feast wherever he goes, right? I mean, even in New Orleans, even in Seattle, like even though Seattle has all those mouths to feed, I think he'll get the targets. I think he's going to get the looks. These teams know what he can add, and they know what he can bring to the table. I don't think we saw the best OBJ in Cleveland, right? I don't think it's the player. I think it was more of the situation there. And to what his dad said, maybe Baker just didn't like him and didn't want to throw him the ball, right? So it's like, I think anywhere is going to be a step up for him in what he's been doing in fantasy lately.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Baker, his comments after too, like, yeah, we're real close friends. We're good buddies. I'm rooting for him. I love the guy. We haven't chatted since he's been released, but we're real good friends. It's like, okay, well, you're obviously not that good of friends if you're not chatting, but nonetheless, I think, like I said off the top, I think Green Bay is the best landing spot for him, right? You have the safety over the top that's going to worry about Devontae Adams. You can have some one-on-one coverage. And I heard LaShawn McCoy talk about just that exact thing on Good Morning Football here this morning with OBJ and just that environment with the Packers. And he talked about when he was with the Eagles and they had Vic and they had Macklin and they had Deshaun and just the attention that these teams had to, like, it was a three-headed monster at that moment. And that's exactly what would be the case with Green Bay and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, who's trending up. Obviously Kansas City would be a pretty good environment for him too, but I just don't know how many targets he would get with KC. Like I think he would be the number 3 inside that offense, but man, my goodness, it would be pretty deadly.
So according to this little sleeper notification here, and then we won't read much into it, we have quote unquote firm belief that Odell Beckham will sign with the Saints. So that doesn't tell us much, right? That's not confirmed. You kind of alluded to it. Hometown guy, right? Went to LSU. If you're going to go somewhere, Louisiana, you might as well feel. And that's the thing with Odell. I really do think he needs to find a place if he wants to, get back on track to the career path we all kind of foresaw being one of the best receivers ever. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. He was breaking Randy Moss's records through the first couple of years here. Double-digit touchdowns in consecutive years, 1,000-yard seasons, 100-yard reset. Like, it was crazy. I mean, first couple of years, Odell was nuts. And he's nowhere near that. He couldn't even sniff that right now. But I think for him, it's more about getting grounded after being in Cleveland. And I mean, the Saints make sense. In terms of fantasy, I think he'll be fine. Obviously, they kind of want to run the ball there with Kamara, but he is a dink and dunk kind of receiver. They take some deep shots, but he could fill that Michael Thomas role maybe until he gets back and, take all that short stuff and eat up receptions, maybe 8 to 10 targets a game, catch about 6, 7 of them. That's a pretty good day.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly what the Saints need. We can say that. Obviously, missing Michael Thomas all of the entire season. They need a guy to step up inside that offense. So, I mean, you got a nice 1-2 punch in Kamara and Ingram, and then you have OBJ. Do you think that they're going to make the switch to Taysom Hill? I mean, Simeon looked okay. I mean, Jake brought it up on Monday that he thought he looked all right. But, at the end of the day, I thought it was just like a decent fourth quarter where they came back against the Falcons and he had an okay fantasy day. But what you said last week kind of stuck with me. Like, they paid all that money for Taysom Hill. Sean Payton said he never at one moment thought to bench Simeon and go to Taysom Hill. But man, I don't know. Like, if the Saints lose this week, like, they may have to make that switch at quarterback.
I don't know how you don't make the switch after losing to the Falcons at home last week, right?
Right.
It's tough though, because obviously the big performance against the Bucks and then like a lackluster performance against the Falcons, but I don't know what they're expecting out of Trevor Siemian. Like, for me, even if you were going to have Siemian at quarterback, they did not use Taysom Hill nearly enough. And maybe they're trying to ease him back with the concussions and so on and so forth, right? Maybe he cleared the protocol and they needed him to be on the roster and they kind of thrusted him into it just to be there and maybe even be a decoy to a certain extent. But I think the Saints are a better team with him at quarterback. Now, I don't know if that helps someone like OBJ, right? I don't think Taysom Hill is the most polished passer, but in terms of getting that team to win and advance as a playoff football team, which I think they're capable of doing, he's got to be a focal point. He just has to be. He's an unaccounted for runner in that offensive scheme. When you have to account for a quarterback running the ball the way Taysom Hill can, especially in the red zone, it is hard to defend as a defense. So, we will see. We will see this week, but I don't know why they're even going to trot Trevor Siemian out there again, at least as started.
The Saints are 3-point dogs this week in Tennessee against the Titans. And one thing, OBJ, too, he's a pretty good run blocker. Like, he adds that element to his game as well. I mean, it doesn't help you in fantasy, but it's obviously there's
so much so he got hurt last year. He got hurt last year trying to do exactly that. He came back into the play to block. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe you shouldn't block as much. All right, let's take a look at the top 10 added players in Yahoo over the last 24 hours. So, like most standard leagues, we talk about it all the time. The waivers run Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. Eastern, roughly. I'm setting alarms for like 4 my time so I can grab guys before other guys wake up that kind of sneak through the claims. But here we go. Devonta Freeman up at the top. The Ravens have a date with Miami tomorrow. So a pretty good matchup for Freeman. I was impressed with what I saw from him last week. I mentioned off the top of the show, no Latavius at practice, short week. Don't expect him to play. And Freeman, 70 some odd yards on the ground. He had a receiving touchdown. Jordan Howard was signed this morning to the 53-man roster. He's been pretty good over the past couple weeks. This isn't the best spot for him against the Broncos in Denver, but clearly the lead in that offense, back-to-back strong weeks for him, and he played over Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell in one more game here for at least one more game for Miles Sanders to be sidelined. Dearness Johnson was on the most dropped list, so we have the trend continuing here on this show. Every week, one player from the most dropped is on the most added, but this one is kind of not really in terms of play, but just Nick Chubb with testing positive for COVID. Elijah Moore was your wide receiver 1 for week 9. Brandon Bolden. Pat Freiermuth had 2 touchdowns. We talked about him at length yesterday. He is a top 12 tight end currently right now in fantasy, really with just 3 solid weeks. Donovan Peoples-Jones has 70-plus yards in 3 straight games. Benjamin is that guy that I feel like Tino will get into him in a little bit, but I feel like there's always that, everyone goes for a high price back, and then that other one kind of floats under the radar. Most people already own Connor, but this could be kind of similar where that back that nobody's really thinking about that you spent a couple bucks on could turn out to be a player here in fantasy over the past couple weeks. And then Alexander Madison on this list and Rashad Bateman. The Madison thing, there's some reports with Dalvin Cook. I know Adam Schefter's been tweeting about it lately, reportedly accused of physical and emotional abuse in a lawsuit filed by his ex-girlfriend. We'll keep an eye on all of that, but that's as much as I'll say right now. So the pitchers didn't look good. Don't know the status of Dalvin Cook, but Alexander Madison should be owned regardless. I just think he's one of the better handcuffs in all of football, and you want to have your investments protected at this time of the season. And even if you don't have Cook, I think he's a great stash if your league is deep enough and you can afford to have him on your bench. Rashad Bateman in there as well. What do you make of this list? I guess, Dearness Johnson, I got him ranked as a top 15 running back this week. If the backfield is going to be his, Felton tested positive as well. I just think Tino will probably see maybe not as productive as a game as he had that Thursday night against the Broncos, but a guy that's probably going to touch the ball 15 plus times and be 20 opportunities.
Yeah, not the best matchup against the Patriots, right? Not the best,
Right.
but I was able to get him. So I told you this. I adapted the Meaney strategy of picking up backup running backs before Sunday starts, just in case something happens. Did it with AJ
Nice.
Dillon this week, and I did it with Dearness Johnson. Dillon actually played well without anyone getting hurt. And then so I had Johnson. Long story short, I had to activate a few people. Montgomery off IR, Wilson off IR. I ended up dropping Johnson just loosely off my team maybe 20 minutes before the news came out about Chubb. I was like, well, that's just great. But I was able to get him again. So I'm encouraged by that. I think he's going to be a solid flex play for me this week because we're still dealing with buys. Like I said, I had Montgomery in that league. So now I don't have Bears running backs. Anyways, I wanted to look at the end of that list. I like looking at the back 5. I feel like enough has been said about the top 5. The Freiermuth news to me with him just going off the way he's been going off. It's not even news. It's just like, if you haven't heard yet, now you know, right? I mean, Monday night, he kind of put it on full display. The last 2 weeks, the game-winning touchdown he had 2 weeks ago was big time as well. I think 7 targets in the last 3 games, over double-digit fantasy points. He's putting up touchdowns, but he's not really touchdown dependent. Like, Big Ben cannot throw the ball downfield, not accurately at least. And so he is feeding Freiermuth. And we knew, though, that Big Ben, with like Heath Miller and these guys, like back in the day, he loves his tight ends. So I think we have something here. If he's out there and you're streaming tight ends, go no further. I think you pick this guy up, they pass their by, set and forget, and just, let him go off, especially with Juju out. Freiermuth and then Rashad Bateman too. I think, shout out to D-Bro. It might be Rashad Bateman season. He's getting an uptick in work, double-digit fantasy points in the last 2 games. I think he had 8 targets last week. He's not seen the field as much as we want. I think only 66% of snaps. But the targets are there. They want to use him underneath. Brown is still getting the stuff downfield. But, when it's not Mark Andrews, it's Rashad Bateman right now. So those 2 guys I feel like are, if they're still out there, go no further. Because they might be. I picked up Bateman this morning in a couple leagues for that reason.
Yeah, 45% ownership for Bateman. I mean, the 3 games, he's got 20 targets in 3 games. Now, Sammy Watkins is going to come back, but I don't think it really matters. We'll
No.
keep an eye on that this week to see if he really does cut in and where the pecking order is in terms of snaps and these guys running routes. But I do believe Bateman is the clear two among wide receivers. Andrew's still a big part of that offense. But yeah, 20 targets is pretty solid for, a rookie wide receiver in their first 3 games. So absolutely agree there. Yeah, Freiermuth, I don't think it's this bold to say, but I think that he's going to finish ahead of Kyle Pitts at the end of the season. And that would have been bold to say that at the start of the season, that Pat Freiermuth would have a better fantasy season than Kyle Pitts, is on average the 4th tight end taken off the board. And here we are, I'm looking at Pat Freiermuth's ownership, and it's at 54%. This with a 14% spike over the last 24 hours. So he has been pretty productive over the last 3 weeks. You mentioned it. He's getting about 7 targets per game over those last 3 weeks as well. So he's a guy that I am going to have ranked the rest of the way as a top 10 tight end. And we can get into trades a little bit later on. But what I said yesterday with Kyle Pitts, I think it applies. Like if you picked up a Pat Freiermuth or even, holding Logan Thomas, or I don't know, Dawson Knox is going to come back here soon. Dan Arnold to an extent. It depends on what you could get. But I'd be comfortable rolling out those names I just mentioned. And then maybe you could get 2 pieces for Kyle Pitts. He's a big name. There's no Calvin Ridley. The Falcons' schedule is decent. I think you could get a couple pieces to help your balance, just give you a more balanced squad. I mentioned, Bolden I will throw out there because we don't know the status of Stevenson or Damien Harris, both of these guys in concussion protocol. So if they couldn't suit up, Brandon Bolden at 24% ownership, he may have just flown under the radar in your leagues. Some other guys that didn't appear on that list, Devin Singletary, we don't know the status of Zach Moss. His ownership is 71%. Desean Jackson in a deep league. It's got to be a deep league, guys. And it's a risky play. It's probably more of a DFS play, but I do feel like he's going to have that Henry Ruggs role, just that deep threat. Maybe Carr takes 1 or 2 shots down the field with him. Other guys on this list, like Kenyon Drake's ownership is around 60%. He should be rostered. He probably benefits really from no Ruggs as well. He was catching balls out of the backfield last week. And then I already threw out Logan Thomas as a tight end that I do like. He was playing about 100% of the snaps before he went down with an injury. Benjamin, let's just touch on him before we break. You picked him up, right? You picked him up in the sleeper league that I'm in with you, the Dynasty League. Yeah, I feel like this could be a similar situation of what we've seen the past couple of years in Arizona. Last year with Drake and Edmonds, and this year with Edmonds and Drake. I don't know if it's going to be full-on Drake. We may see a bit of a 60-40, 70-30, and that's kind of appealing for, Eno in a deep league as like a flex play maybe.
So I've followed Eno since he was in Arizona State. So hometown guy, went to Arizona. He's, undersized, but he runs with power. You saw it against the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers. Dude ran over some dude for his touchdown, right? In a one-on-one tackle. So showed a lot there. I do think, the timeshare will still be a thing. I know they're going to want to use Connor, but honestly, to the same point, I'm not even picking up Benjamin for right now. We don't know how severe Edmonds is, but James Conner has glass bones and paper skin just as much, right? Over the last couple of years. I know he took off, and luckily I started him in most places, and I have James Conner, and that's great, but it is the fact of the matter, right? He's dealt with it a lot over the last couple of years. So say he goes down, even for a game, we're talking about one of these situations like we talk about. He's now kind of not necessarily a premier handcuff, but he's the next man up. He turns into a guy who can catch passes and run the ball for an Arizona Cardinals team that show when they feature a back is, top 15,
Absolutely
top 15 worthy. So, yeah.
Yeah. Pretty productive. I agree. You can get some balls to the backfield. And I think that's super appealing too. And we don't know, like Odell. We don't know Odell's on my mind. We don't know Hopkins. Like this guy may apply this week, so we'll keep an eye on all that. But I think he's a sneaky little ad, and I liked that pickup from you. I had a bid in as well, but you trumped it. You got it. So good on you. Good on you, man. I'm gonna be jealous because I think he may be a factor down the stretch, especially if Edmonds does miss 3 or 4 weeks. He could be a factor. There's no question.
Well, and the two of them, we'll take the break, but the two of them, Edmonds and Connor, I started them both in a league. They were both producing double digits, game, pretty much in full point PPR. It's kind of like Mike Davis, Cordero Patterson. So Connor was getting the touchdowns, but Edmonds was doing fine. So,
Absolutely. All right, we'll break, and then we'll take a look at the most drop players, and I'm sure there's going to be 1 or 2 names on here that we're a little hesitant to drop, and maybe that, if you see them on your waiver wire, you can go pick them up. See if that trend continues. We'll talk drop players here next on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Tino Rodriguez here with you, Chris Meaney as well, of course. And now we're going to take a look at the most dropped players in fantasy football in Yahoo leagues. Up at the top, we got Khalil Herbert. I get this one, but this is one of those ones where I'm just like, man, who knows, right? If Montgomery suffers an injury, we already saw Khalil Herbert, have some pretty productive games in that backfield. But Montgomery, I thought, looked pretty good against the Steelers on Monday night. Boston Scott, Jordan Love, just maybe a stream for the one game, and he didn't really give you a whole lot. This is the one right here. Jeremy Mcnichols. People spent all kinds of fab on this guy. Somebody in our FTN league spent $100 on him. Didn't drop him, but, he was... people spent a lot of fab on him. Derek Gore, Kadarius Toney, Daniel Jones, Chuba Hubbard has been on this list 2 or 3 times. Brian Edwards, and then Carlos Hyde in there. So it does sound like James Robinson's going to return, but I'm a little hesitant about dropping Carlos Hyde, even though I don't think he's all that productive as a running back, but as a guy that maybe you plug in if you need somebody as a pinch. As a James Robinson owner, if I see him on the waiver wire, I got to get him. And then really just... Jeremy Mcnichols, man. I don't know. What did you make of the Titans' backfield? When Jake and I talked in All in Football, I said it was a bloody mess. We had AP, had the most carries. He wasn't that productive with them, Tino. He did get the goal line touch at the end of the game, a couple of them for a touchdown. He had a couple early on the game, which he couldn't get in, but he did find a way to get in towards the end. I thought D'Onta Foreman looked the best of the 3. Man, I think Jeremy Mcnichols still has some upside, though. He still kind of kept his third down role. He was getting some carries and catching some balls out of the backfield. What did you make of the Titans' backfield?
Well, that just frightened me because in one league it's so bad I have to start both Boston Scott and Jeremy Mcnichols. So 2 of my starters are on a drop list, so that's not great. Yeah, we talked about this last week. I was like, I feel like I'm one of the only people who are not, and I love Adrian Peterson, was just not banging the table well, AP could just kind of pick it up. They forced that touchdown on him, and it wasn't easy to get. And we mentioned it last week when we talked about it. It was going to be a disaster. I thought the entire backfield, you're not gonna just replicate Derrick Henry's touches and just make up for that like it's nothing. It isn't going to happen. And so, they did their best in a game where they needed to run the ball, mind you, right? Think about it. Based on game script, they were up against the Rams. You want to run the ball, and still, even then, it too many mouths to feed. I think Foreman did look the best. So, yeah, I don't love it, but again, I'm not dropping him. We say it every week. Don't drop any running backs. Most of these guys are handcuffed. Boston Scott, I don't get. He's still at 10 carries. I guess he's out of the receiving game, but what? Because Gainwell had 2 touches and scored a touchdown on one of them. It was so unnecessary. The Eagles, do not get me started on the Eagles. I will never invest in this backfield ever again. Drafting Miles Sanders, I only drafted him in 2 leagues, and it was still the worst decisions I could have made. I don't make sense of it. I can't make sense of it. Gainwell getting 2 touches and one of them in the red zone is just, I don't know. I don't have any words for it. I really don't.
I don't either. I hope, honestly, I love Miles Sanders as a football player. I hope that when he comes back, they give him the rock, or I just hope that he lands in another environment where they can lean on him, because I'm not convinced when Sanders comes back that he's just going to be they're going to be okay, here, we'll give the ball to Sanders, because Howard has played good, and then you got Scott, and then you got Gainwell. So yeah, it is a complete mess. I will say about Brian Edwards. So this was a guy that was, I think, in most of my leagues, I don't really have any shares. He was dropped in one of my leagues. I'm looking now. It's a small 10-team league. So I understand the drop there, but he's owned across the board in most of my leagues, despite his ownership going from 30% to 20% in Yahoo leagues. What I will say about him is that it was just one game. And I suppose you could speak on this a little bit more with your Giants in the corners there. I've heard Jake talk about it before. Attacking the middle of the field is the way that you go against the Giants. But even still, Brian Edwards, just the one game here without Henry Ruggs, I don't think people should panic. If you spent some fab on him, you spent a high quality on him, a high pick or whatever on your waiver wires, don't over panic. He's got the Chiefs this week. I think this could be a better bounce back game for him. What do you think? What did you make of Edwards? He was really not a factor at all against your Giants, but it doesn't mean that he won't be moving forward. He could easily be the number 3 inside this offense for the Raiders moving forward. And there's some high up-tempo games for them moving forward.
Well, yeah, so I think it's him or Zay Jones. In leagues I couldn't get Brian Edwards, I ended up with Zay Jones. I think, something's got to give there. Neither of them did anything, right? So the Giants give up a ton of yards, and somehow neither of these guys were involved. Now, I get it if you look at how to attack them and you see how the Chiefs did it. Obviously, running backs are going to get a lot of easy work. They kind of give up everything in front of them. So that's why running backs have over 6 receptions. And obviously in each of the last 2 games, I'm sure it's even more. That's just off the top of my head. It's an easy way to go about it. Renfro and Tyreek Hill both went off because they're short possession receivers. Tyreek Hill could obviously go downfield, but he can make a man miss. Most of the way he tore up the Giants on his 12 receptions were exactly that. And then the tight ends. I mean, they shut down Kelsey, but Waller took a lot of that. So I think if Waller doesn't have as big of a day, maybe it has some room for some of those other guys to feast. I want to mention the Giants that are on here. I feel like we gotta talk about it because you asked earlier this week, and similar to not knowing how to justify the Eagles running backs, I don't know how to describe what happened to the Giants receivers this week. We bring back Kenny Golladay, right, off injury, and we pretty much only target him once on a slant. I think he ended up with 2 receptions. But between him and Tony, they had 3 receptions. Tony had a pass attempt, not really an attempt, he got sacked, a rush attempt, and 1 reception that pretty much went nowhere. I don't know how you even justify not getting your guys the ball, right? I don't think it's a matter of giving up on Tony. Like, I would keep him as much as I can. But if you let him go, I have no problem with it because it's not the player, it's the situation, right? Even with Danny, I think Danny's a fine quarterback. But last week, he starts out the game throwing a deep pass to Evan Ingram from 30 yards out on a touchdown, and they didn't attempt to pass further than 15 yards the rest of the game, right? So it's like I can't make ends of it. And they have plenty of talent, and I would love for these guys to be viable fantasy options, but we're so hot and cold on offense for the Giants that, and I noticed I said I tried to not say it, but I said it.
It's all good.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So I would temper expectations on Tony and keep him if you can. But they're on a bye, so I know that's probably large in part why you have to drop him. But he's probably going to be on the most added next week, is where I'm getting.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, you're rocking the Giants sweater, so you could say we. It's all good. No, but I'm in total agreement for you. And I figured you would bring him up, and if you didn't, that's how I was going to end this segment with Tony. Like, if you see him on the waiver wire, like, I think he's a great stash. Like, he could really. We're still like, they get the bye here, so maybe they got a couple weeks to figure it out, and he hasn't been 100%. So maybe he's a little bit more feeling more himself heading out of the bye against the Bucs defense, where we all know you can't run on them. You can throw on them, and you're probably going to have to throw on them to play catch up. And I if I see him on the waiver wire, it's a guy that I'm definitely going to pick up and stash him, because there's no question, Tino, we're definitely going to be talking about Kadarius Toney again. We're only at the halfway point. There's still week 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, 5 more weeks here before we get to fantasy football playoff time. So I think he could be certainly be a good stash as well. All right, let's break, and we'll take a look at the most traded players from CBS Sports, and we'll see if you agree with any of these guys, if you'd like to acquire them, or if you're in the camp of getting them off your roster as well. So Mean Streets continuing here next on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Meat Streets here on a Game Plus Network. We are going to take a look at the most traded players in CBS Sports League. I always take a look at these roster trends. I always just find it fascinating, and it kind of helps me too of guys that may be available or to write about in the buy low and sell high trade target article, which you can catch over at ftnfantasy.com. All right, so let's bring this up. This is from CBS Sports. So obviously a lot of big names on here. We got Elijah Mitchell up at the top, Damien Harris, Antonio Gibson, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Keenan Allen, George Kittle, and Michael Carter of the Jets. I am absolutely in the camp of acquiring acquiring Elijah Mitchell, the most traded player in fantasy. Last week he only had 8 carries, but Hasty only had a couple, and there was only 12 carries out of the backfield, altogether, and one was Brendan Ayuk, and an end around, and then another one was from Jimmy Garoppolo towards the end of the game. So he still had a big bulk of the carries, Tino, and also caught 5 passes out of the backfield. So that's huge for his upside. If they're gonna, start targeting him out of the backfield, I mean, that's great. I know there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to Shanahan and some of these multiple running backs, like Jeff Wilson was active. He was also one of the most dropped players as well. I think number 11. I just didn't want to include him on that list anyways, because he's just like a dart pickup. But he may get a couple goal line carries here moving forward. But listen to this, schedule for the Niners. Like, they got the Rams this week, which is tough, but there's been multiple running backs that have had great days against them, catching balls into the backfield, playing from behind. Jacksonville, Minnesota, Seattle, Cincy, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston. It's actually one of the better schedules in fantasy moving forward. Damien Harris does not have a great schedule. He's banged up right now. Oh man, as an owner, I've been trying to get rid of this guy for a couple weeks, but nobody will buy in. Antonio Gibson, maybe the week off has helped him a little bit, but I feel like I'm in the same sort of camp. I would like to get rid of him and acquire anything I could in return because I'm completely worried about him. Kelsey's probably like, hey, maybe I picked up a Freiermuth. Maybe I picked up a Dan Arnold. Maybe I'm comfortable rolling these two guys out. Logan Thomas, pick him up off, the waiver wire. He could be active this week, and I can get 2 pieces for Kelsey. I'm in the camp of flipping Diggs, too, if it meant getting 2 solid pieces for him as well. And we could touch on another giant here. It's Saquon. Like, dude, this guy may be the best buy low candidate in fantasy football right now, but as you know, there's a lot of risk in acquiring him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a take on Saquon yet because the offense hasn't looked particularly great, even with him healthy, right? I mean, other than the Saints game, he barely gets to double-digit fantasy points, but it's all depending on what you give up. The name on there, I'm interested to see what people gave up for is Michael Carter, because obviously he's someone that you sell high on, right? And I'm still high on him, but in redraft, I wonder what you can get out of him because Ty Johnson's free on the waiver wire, right? So it's like I'm just curious. Like he's so under the radar, but he's pretty much doing what Michael Carter's doing, like to a certain extent. Carter's like up here, right, with his upside and the big play potential, and his ceiling's like 30 points, right? We've seen it already. But Ty Johnson, he finds the end zone, catches passes, does the same thing. So I'm just curious on how much they would give up. So a few of the guys on there, I've either listened to offers for or acquired. Damien Harris, I've traded. And then I got Keenan Allen this week.
Nice.
If you can get one of these wide receiver ones, man, do it, right? I am a firm believer that, like, I tend to wait on receiver in fantasy drafts because it gets so deep in terms of waiver wire and injuries. Like, you can find so many receivers that you can play. We already talked about Rashard Bateman earlier this show. But at the same time, those guys getting, like, running back workloads and, like, Keenan Allen, that's the best. Stephon Diggs not so much anymore, but Keenan Allen right now is getting a ridiculous amount of work, and the touchdowns aren't there, but the targets and the receptions are. The yards to catch up to him. Like, if you can get him, I don't even know how you'd be able to get him after last week's performance against the Eagles, but if you can get him, I'd still float out offers and see. He is Herbert's number one. I know Mike Williams had some hype earlier this season, but Keenan Allen, man, he's coming. He's going to finish as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, even though it didn't seem that way.
I was surprised to see him on the list, to be honest, because I don't know who would want to trade him, especially with Mike Williams not, he doesn't seem 100% healthy. He always gets those tough corners. Like we saw Slay there was one big play where he had a catch, but for the most part, Slay kind of shut him down. Okay, so here's an example before we break. You're 6-3. Say you're 6-3. You're going to the playoffs. I'm 3-6. I'm 1 game out. I have Saquon. You have James Conner. Would you flip James Conner to get Saquon? Would you take the risk of acquiring Saquon, knowing that he's not playing this week? He may not play week 11, and if he does, it's up against the Bucs. Would you flip Conner for Saquon?
So I don't mind it, but I wouldn't do a 1-for-1. I'd definitely ask for something else if I'm giving up Saquon.
Okay.
Because the thing is, you got to think of the collateral.
I'm giving Saquon to you, and you're giving me James Conner.
Yeah, you're the losing team, right? In this scenario, I don't mind it in the landscape that you have to win this week, right? But at the same time, if you've like homed Saquon on your bench this entire time, eating those injuries, taking those losses because you don't have him, and now you're just kind of going to give him up for a high upside, off a high upside week in James Conner, who again, glass bones, paper skin, don't forget. So it's like you just kind of wrote out the injury part of it. You don't know, like Conner might have just hit a ceiling. Maybe not. Maybe. Like I need a little insurance behind it if I'm giving up who Saquon still is and what he could be. The Giants have a very favorable schedule. I didn't want to bring that part up. They come out against the Bucs. It's a lot like last year, man. Other than the Bucs and the Chargers on the road, a lot of NFC East and the Dolphins and the Bears. Like that is what it is. So
yeah,
they're going to score some points, even though it seems impossible sometimes. And I think if Saquon's healthy, he's going to be a part of that. So I don't mind it because you have to win this week, right? If you don't win this week, what's the point of even having Saquon? But you definitely probably need a little bit more if you're 3-6 right now and have had Saquon on your bench. So I don't think it hurts asking for a flex wide receiver or something else, or maybe even a flex RB in that package, because no one who's trading James Conner doesn't know what he's just done and what he's been, right? So
Yeah. Always reach high, see what you can get, and then you can lower expectations.
Pretty cool.
Tampa out of the bye, Philly, Miami, the Chargers, Dallas, Philly, and then Chicago if you get there week 17. But that schedule's pretty juicy, man. That's why I think he's certainly worth the risk. But it does all depend on your situation. All right, we got some NHL and some NBA talk here next to round out Mean Streets. Don't go anywhere. 13 games in the NBA today. Wednesdays are nuts, man. Tuesdays and Thursdays in the NHL are absolutely bonkers. And then Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the NBA are absolutely crazy too. So we're just going to touch on the NBA schedule here for a couple minutes. Tino, you and I chatted before we got on here. I don't think you said you don't want to back a road favorite. I understand that, man. But I think I got to go with the Pacers here. You get the -3, or if you want to go on the money line at -148. Of course, if you pick them on the spread at -3 here, -110. Denver with no Joker. I think I got to go that way. They're always missing some guys. I'm falling for the trap.
Meaney, the Pacers 1-5 away. Denver 4-1 at home. It's just one of those things. Even though they're getting 3 points, it doesn't seem like much. They shouldn't be getting any points. Just call it a pick 'em. Call it what it is. It really could go either way. It's going to be ugly. Yeah, they should be favored, but again, I got burned. I've been getting burned on on road favorites. It just, and when you break it down, it makes more sense to bet the home dogs anyways. And I have a heavy dose of that today. So let's get into it.
What do you got?
Well, we'll start with one home dog who is on fire and a lot of people don't know about for some reason yet, and it's the Cleveland Cavaliers. They beat the Knicks on the road to pick up their 4th straight win. The Wizards have been killing me. They beat the Bucks recently, and their last time out, I was on the Bucks there as a bounce back game. I was one game too soon. They ended up bouncing back against the Sixers, who didn't have Embiid. So whatever, game too soon. But the Wizards beat the Grizzlies and they beat the Bucks. So 2 very good wins. But I don't know, man. Coming back home, the Cavs just beat the Knicks, beat the Raptors, beat the Hornets, and the Trailblazers. So 4 pretty solid wins, all of them relatively close, getting 3 points. So 2 of those 4 games were decided by 3 points or less. Or actually, 3 of the 4 games were decided by 3 points or less. So getting 3 at home, feel pretty good about that. These teams are neck and neck, 7-3, 7-4. So that'll be close. Okay, few more. We're riding the Bucks. The Bucks will bounce back. As much as I can't stand them, and everyone says it's impossible to hate Giannis. Shout out to Joe Mets. Can't stand him. I can't stand him. But I will bet him tonight against the Knicks, okay? I will bet him tonight. Yeah, +4, +135, okay? Lakers at home. So, again, we're not chasing the road favorites in the Heat again. I can't do it again. I think the Lakers at home, they've just been playing unpredictable, just not good basketball, the Lakers. I mean, Russell Westbrook comes to this team, and this guy, wherever he goes, it just follows him, right? So, but what, plus 148 at home. This is just a money line parlay. I'm going with 3 of those dogs there, and then we're going to go with the home favorites in the Boston Celtics, minus 129 against the Toronto Raptors. That is 22-1 odds. The only play I have right now, a 22-1 odd parlay, 4 legs there, 10 to win 230. So I feel pretty good about that. We're gonna sprinkle more when the props come out. Those are the first early leans I have in this. Some other good matchups: the Bulls, the Mavs, even the Hornets versus the Grizzlies. LaMelo versus Ja is going to be great as well. But those are the games I'm on as of right now.
So the props don't come out until later on. When things slow down NFL, we really will dive into more basketball and try to get some props. But yeah, there is one prop I like, as we get out of here and switch gears to hockey, is Jarrett Allen at 12.5 rebounds. I've been hitting this guy over the past couple weeks. You talked about Cleveland, man, they're playing like decent. I've kind of like been impressed when I watch them play. It's like, it's not boring basketball either. It's been exciting. 16 rebounds per game as well. So Jarrett Allen at over 12.5 rebounds at minus 110. You can get that over at DraftKings or FanDuel, or for those Bet365, I'm seeing it at minus 115. So not bad there, Jarrett Allen. All right, we'll break and get some hockey picks next on Mean Streets. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here one final time. I'm going to turn our attention to the NHL. Only 3 games on the ice here this evening, but I got some shot props for you. Anyways, let's start with those shot props and then some picks towards the end here. So this is what I'm thinking. You got Dollar Bill, the Thrill Kirill Kaprizov at 2.5 shots. William Nylander, Matt Duchene, Tyler Seguin, Sean Couturier, all at 2.5 shots. I think Kaprizov is where I'm going to take some shots here on Kaprizov. I've got some units to spend here. We're at 39 units in the on the NHL season. On sides are 41 and 29, 11 units total, 16 and 8, 6 units and props, 126 and 93, 23 units. We keep track of everything over at ftmbets.com. So for Kaprizov, he's at minus 150, so it's juiced to the over. But if you can include him into a parlay, then it's well worth it. He's cleared 2.5 shots in 9 straight games. More on him in just a little bit. Nylander has cleared 2.5 in 6 of his past 7 games. Tavares and Nylander are 2 guys that I've been going to quite often this season. Books are starting to adjust. They're starting to change the odds a little bit, but Willie's got the best price of the for Leafs. Marner is a bit of a pass-first guy, even though he's been shooting, but I like William Nylander. I actually like some offense in this Philly game. We'll get to that in a little bit, but he's cleared in 6 of his past 7 and 11 shots over his last 2 and 20 shots on net over his last 4. Tyler Seguin has 1 shot in back-to-back games, but his previous 6 he cleared in 2.5. Couturier is that guy for me tonight, plus money here. So this is a plus money prop. All these other guys are kind of juiced a little bit. You can get Duchesne at minus 125. He's had at least over 2.5 shots in 6 of his past 8, but 2 in his last 2 games. So he hasn't cleared, but I have no problem going back to him. But for Couturier, he's red hot. 5 goals and 12 points here on the season. 5 shots in his last game and 3+ in 6 of his past 8. For Kirill the Thrill, assists plus 130 tonight against Arizona. 2 points plus 250. And here's where I'm going to get nuts. I don't think this is a full unit play. Depends on how you bet, but 0.25 could be anything for you. Say 1 unit is $100. Say 1 unit's $1. Let's just say 1 unit's $1. 0.25 can be 25 cents here. For Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov to have 2 goals is plus 800. This is a good spot here against Arizona. They're among the leaders in allowing high danger chances, scoring chances, high quality chances, the most goals at 5 and 5 per 60 minutes so far this season. I think the better bet is an assist at plus 130. He does have 2 games over the last 3 where he has hit the score sheet twice. 2 points is plus 250, but I am getting nuts with the 8-1 2 goals. But let's hope he hits the score sheet here a couple times to get plus 250. And then we can transition into the picks here. This is what I'm thinking. So it's a small slate here this evening with the NHL picks, but I like goals in Toronto and Philly. I don't like goals in Nashville and Arizona. Hopefully, Meaney and Kirill Kaprizov can do his part, but I don't think Arizona can do a whole lot on offense against Minnesota. This game actually in Arizona, but I like the under 5.5. I like the Stars here. You can get the Stars at minus 149 over at William, and DK's got them at minus 150. And then Minnesota here to win by 2 goals. So yes, they are on the road, but that's okay. I still like it, and you can get that at plus 125 for the Minnesota Wild. I think I see like a 3-1 or 4-1 type game. It could be an empty netter that gets us there. Maybe we sweat this out, but I think the way to go is the shot props, only 3 games. But I wouldn't just give you picks for the sake of it. These are the picks that I am feeling. Thanks for taking the time to hang out here today. Tomorrow, we will talk Thursday night football, and we'll have some NFL picks on Friday. A busy night in the NHL tomorrow. So make sure you check out Dangle, Bet, Selly. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.